Allahu, Allahu Akbar, dear friends. God is most glorious. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program sponsored by the Spiritual Assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb County and Sandy Springs, Georgia. So wonderful to have all of you with us today. You know, across the globe, the teachings of the Baha'i faith brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, and whose name in Arabic means the glory of God. His teachings have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, which is a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service with work performed in the spirit of service, actually being accounted as worship in the eyes of God, the fundamental equality of the sexes more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity, the harmony between religion and science as an established fact, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that strive to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Friends, we've been having amazing programs every week, and today we'll continue that tradition. We're pleased to have you all join us. Again, welcome. We'll begin this morning with opening devotions. So please mute yourselves if you're not speaking, silence your electronic devices, etc. Thank you.
And gladden my spirit, my spirit, my spirit. Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, my spirit, my spirit. Purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Oh God, thou art my guide and my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. Oh God, thou art my guide and my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord.
Beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. Kathy?
The reading is not clear.
Do you want to start it again, Barbara?
It's not clear.
No, not you.
Oh,
Kathy?
O Lord, provide for the speedy growth of the tree of thy divine unity. Water it then, O Lord, with the flowing waters of thy good pleasure, and cause it before the revelations of thy divine assurance to yield such fruits as thou desirest for thy glorification and exaltation, thy praise and thanksgiving, and to magnify thy name, to laud the oneness of thine essence, and to offer adoration unto thee, inasmuch as all this lieth within thy grasp, and in that of none other. Great is the blessedness of those whose blood thou hast chosen wherewith to water the tree of thine affirmation, and thus to exalt thy holy and immutable word. The Bob.
Thank you, Kathy. Barbara?
I beseech thee, O my God, by all the transcendent glory of thy name, to clothe thy loved ones in the robe of justice, and to illumine their beings with the light of trustworthiness. Thou art the one that had power to do as he pleaseth, and who holdeth within his grasp the reins of all things, visible and invisible. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Barbara. Bahia?
My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts, both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all-bountiful, the overflowing showers of whose mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendors of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy hath bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit hath circled, we beseech thee, entreating thine ancient grace and seeking thy present favor, that thou mayest have mercy upon all who are the manifestations of the world of being, and deny them not the outpourings of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful Baha'i.
Thank you, Bahia. Yasmin? Yasmin? Are you unmuted?
Okay. Okay. I got to get it from him. He is God. Thou seest, oh my God, gathered around this table, praising thy bounty, with our gaze set upon thy kingdom. O Lord, send down upon us thy heavenly food, and confer upon us thy blessings. Thou art verily the bestower, the merciful, the compassionate, Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Yasmin. Debbie?
That thing is not.
Please mute yourself, Yasmin. Thank you. Debbie? Debbie, are you still there?
O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Barbara. Kathy?
O Lord, enable all the peoples of the earth to gain admittance into the paradise of thy faith, so that no created being may remain beyond the bounds of thy good pleasure. From time immemorial, thou hast been potent to do what pleaseth thee, and transcendent above whatsoever thou desirest. The Bob.
Thank you, Kathy. Bahia.
This is the day in which the testimony of the Lord hath been fulfilled, the day in which the word of God hath been made manifest, and his evidence firmly established. His voice is calling you unto that which shall profit you, and enjoineth you to observe that which shall draw you nigh unto God, the Lord of revelation. Baha'i.
Thank you, Bahia. Barbara McClendon.
We must now highly resolve to arise and lay hold of all these instrumentalities that promote the peace and well-being and happiness, the knowledge, culture, and industry, the dignity, value, and station of the entire human race. Thus, through the restoring waters of pure intention and unselfish effort, the earth of human potentialities will blossom with its own latent excellence and flower into trustworthy qualities and bear and flourish until it comes to rival that rose garden of knowledge which belonged to our forefathers. Then will this holy land of Persia become in every sense the focal center of human perfections, reflecting as if in a mirror the full panoply of world civilization. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Barbara. Kathy.
The creative energies mysteriously generated by the first stirrings of the embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah have, as soon as released within a nation destined to become its cradle and champion, endowed that nation with the worthiness and invested it with the powers and capacities and equipped it spiritually to play the part foreshadowed in these prophetic words. The potency which this God-given mission has infused into its peoples are, on the one hand, beginning to be manifested through the conscious efforts and the nationwide accomplishments in both the teaching and administrative spheres of Baha'i activity, of the organized community of the followers of Baha'u'llah in the North American continent. These same potencies, apart from, yet collateral with these efforts and accomplishments, are, on the other hand, insensibly shaping, under the impact of the world political and economic forces, the destiny of that nation, and are influencing the lives and actions of both its government and its people. Shoghi Effendi.
Thank you, Kathy. Friends, it's now time for the healing prayer. If any of you wish to remember a loved one through the prayer for healing, please feel free to call out their name at this time. Thank you. Josie.
Barbara Sacco,
Missy Smith,
Colleen O'Hare,
Barbara
Felicia.
McClendon,
Felicia Alexander,
Bradley Wright Hewlett,
Denise
Stacy Simmons, Richard Harper,
Dr. Bowen, Beth Bowen,
Joel Smith,
Jack Arnold,
Dewey Hanton. Jack Gilliba.
Hi.
Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. My hope,
Unmute yourself if you're not
my
speaking.
hope, and love, for thee is my companion. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God. Thy mercy to me is my healing in both this world and the world to come. World to come. And love, for thee is my companion. Thou verily art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise. Thou verily art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God.
That was beautiful, Barbara. Thank you. Friends, now we're blessed to have artiste extraordinaire, Emma Salahuddin, who's going to play the didgeridoo for us. Emma. Yasmin, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Barbara, do we know what happened to Emma?
No. She's not here.
Let's see. Not at the moment.
Uh-oh, she must have got bumped off because she was here.
I know.
Well, maybe she can join us and at the end. She could do her.
I think that will work. Okay, friends, we will place her presentation after Counselor Lawson. Each week we're blessed to have a guest presenter to come and share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week we are honored and blessed to have back with us Counselor Nwandi Lawson, who has, as you know, given presentations to this community in the past. We're pleased to have her share with us today. So please welcome Counselor Lawson, whose topic this morning is Pursuing Patterns of Action with Unabated Vigor and Determination. Counselor Lawson.
Thank you very much, Hermione. It's really nice to see everyone this morning. And certainly, I know we're all looking forward to the days when we can actually reconvene in that beautiful space right behind Hermione on the screen. It's lovely to look and see you in front of the Baha'i Unity Center. I want to, of course, bring to you not only my own personal greetings and love, because of course the South DeKalb Baha'i community is my home community, and it's the community in which I actually became a Baha'i. So I have great love and affection for the people here. But I also want to just bring to you as well the love and greetings of the institution of the counselors. And as you know, of course, there are some 21 counselors who serve the Americas now. And even though individual counselors get an opportunity to focus work in a given geographic zone most of the time, it really is really with the love and support and care and guidance of the entire institution. And I know you probably noticed in the last few days that you received a letter from our beloved National Spiritual Assembly, which noted that the institution of the counselors continues to extend its influence and experience through the appointment of the new auxiliary boards for protection and propagation. And so you probably have read with great interest to see the names of those who are serving in the areas where you live, and also realizing that, of course, their assistance will be part of the work that they're going to be extending through this 1-year plan that we're in the midst of now, and into the 9-year plan as well. So it was really wonderful. I can just tell you, even from our own home, when we saw that letter come from the National Spiritual Assembly, and I printed it and took it upstairs so that my daughters could also have a chance to read it. And I know my youngest in particular was taking great pains to make sure that she read all of the names of all of the people in the US who were serving, and asking about, who some of them were. Naturally, she knew some of them from previous service. And then naturally as well, by the time we got to the paragraph that referenced the high regard that the National Spiritual Assembly pays to those who are concluding periods of service, we were also able, of course, to reflect our own appreciation for those who have served as board members, some of them for a very long time, helping us to learn so much about what it is that we're trying to achieve at this particular time. So we know that the auxiliary board members, as in their roles serving the institution of the counselors, that they take high responsibility for the safeguarding of the faith, as well as the promotion of its teaching activities. And that naturally all of the Baha'is, though, are the fuel, if you will, the force behind actually making sure that this is possible. So I thought, really rather inspired, as I'm sure you have been, by a message that we received recently from our National Spiritual Assembly. And it was, in fact, a call to action. We received that on June 3rd. So I know we've been studying it. We've been receiving continued encouragement from the National Spiritual Assembly to continue that study. And we know that from our study, though, emerges action. And then we're able to reflect on action. And when we engage in a pattern like that, then we really do see quite a robust system that has begun to emerge not only in our own home community, but really all over the world. So as Hermione mentioned, I wanted to draw on that June 3rd message and really try to describe together how it is that we will come to pursue patterns of action with unabated vigor and determination. And those are two qualities that I know, we really, I often think about maybe athletics when I think about unabated vigor and determination, right? The ability to run a marathon, knowing that over the course of all of those miles, you can't keep exactly the same pace and expect to finish, but nor will you finish, of course, if you drop out. So if the vigor with which you start does not continue, the determination does not continue, then naturally reaching the finish line is not possible. So I was inspired in particular by the fact that the National Spiritual Assembly called these qualities to our attention in that June 3rd message. And In particular, they said, as the Supreme Body's magnificent Rizvan message this year made abundantly clear, the patterns of action now emerging will empower masses of people in steadily expanding numbers to seize control of their spiritual destinies. They need only be pursued with unabated vigor and determination. So what the good news is that we recognize that these patterns of action now emerging are patterns that we're actually familiar with. This is not something that is brand new to us. We have some experience that we can draw on. However, what we probably want to focus our attention on as we are at the outset of this current one-year plan, it's a plan that we know the House of Justice has asked of us to ensure that no obstacle remain in the path of growth, and has encouraged us back in November when we received its message of November 25th, that every community will seek to remove those obstacles to growth and will continue to flow forward. Now, it won't do that just by itself, right? It also says in that same message that it will draw on the experience of those that have a little more, and that they'll be able to help the places that have a little less experience to continue on their path of growth, which is so nice about this system of Baha'i development in the world. I was thinking myself, of course, about the first day that I walked into the doors that are behind Hermione at the Baha'i Unity Center. As a woman who just walked in off the street, I had met Baha'is in Cameroon some time earlier, a few weeks earlier, and they had told me during the months that I was there with them, learning a little bit about the Baha'i faith, that when I get back to the US, I better go meet the Baha'is. Now, the reason they were saying this to me is because they were attentive to listening to me. They didn't just present to me, this is the Baha'i faith, and they actually listened to what I had to say. And every time I offered to them some remark, it was very funny because we would sit together in the city of Douala in Cameroon, and we would speak French to one another, and they would always laugh and say, "Are you sure you're not a Baha'i?" And then I would laugh because I said, "I don't know, what is a Baha'i?" And then they would share a little bit more about what that meant to them anyway, as to what a Baha'i is and how what it was that I was sharing might be connected to the Baha'i faith. So with their encouragement, naturally, I was going to go and meet the Baha'is when I got back to the US. I knew where the Baha'is were, as a matter of fact, because I had been driving past that center for a great many years. And as a person of some degree of curiosity, I had thought one day I will go inside and see what the Baha'is do. Now, because I had been encouraged by my friends, and because the Friends of South DeKalb were so confident in their approach to sharing the revelation of Baha'u'llah with whomsoever crossed through the doors, the first moment that I walked into that center, I was aware that the Baha'i faith, first of all, encourages participation, contribution by everyone. You all know I've shared this story with you so many times. I won't go into details, but I mean, I was asked to read initially when I came in. I didn't even know what a reading was, if you will. And I said to the person who asked me, "I don't even go here." And he asked me if I could read, and I could. So lo and behold, I could then be not just a passive viewer of a devotional gathering, but actually a contributor. I also recognized in that first gathering that Baha'is are not congregational and they don't have a clergy. How could I tell this? Well, because they let a woman walk in off the street and become a contributor to this devotional gathering. So obviously there wasn't some royal or regal or clerical position that one had to hold in order to contribute. They also did something very wonderful for me on that occasion, because again, while I found the Baha'i devotional gathering uplifting and the people seemed very kind, I personally would not have returned again. It wasn't that captivating as a gathering that I would have said, wow, this is something I must be a part of. Instead, the friends at that particular gathering would not let me leave without a copy of the Hidden Words in a prayer book. They continually tried to get me to come back. I know now that they were trying to get me to come back to where there was some delicious cake and coffee, but I wasn't going there, and I was on my way back out the door. But they kept saying, well, hold on a second. And in fact, it was our dear friend Carol Miller, who's now gone on to the next world, who I now know was running back to the bookstore and purchasing a copy of the Hidden Words and a prayer book. She obviously understood very well how book one actually is not something that you just do and fill in answers and then put it away, but rather that you connect every soul to the Word of God in any way that you can. As a result of the actions of my friends in South DeKalb, I went home that evening, and while not particularly plussed by the devotional gathering that I had attended, not particularly put off by it, I lay in bed and read the hidden words cover to cover, like a novel, because I had them. And the reason I returned the following week was the motivation of the Blessed Beauty, Baha'u'llah. That's why I came back into the building. And again, my friends didn't let me sit and be a spectator. They gave me another reading the following week. And then within a few weeks, one of my friends said, "Can you facilitate the devotional?" And I could, because I actually had a copy of the hidden words and a prayer book. Therefore, I could pull all of the readings necessary to carry out what you all are engaged in today. Within a month, then, of the time that I began interacting with the Baha'is, I had a new relationship with the faith. And therefore, after that, as they began helping me to complete the sequence of courses and to eventually enroll in the faith, the pathway was very clear. And some of these things that eventually were elucidated to me, like the fact that Baha'is are not congregational, like the fact that Baha'is do not have an ordained clergy, I was well aware of these without people even having to state them, just because of the behavior of the people in the South DeKalb community and how empowering that actually was. Now, back to the matter at hand, though. We want to make sure, as the paragraph that I was just referencing says, we have to actually engage in patterns of action that empower masses of people in steadily expanding numbers. So I'm just one example, and I know that over the many years that the Baha'i Unity Center has been in operation and the friends in the South DeKalb Baha'i community have endeavored to do their work, I'm not the only one. They have other examples. But what is before us now is gaining the capacity to welcome the masses and to have that number steadily increasing. So what I would like to share with you right now is just a couple of minutes from the video that the National Spiritual Assembly provided along with this letter, which is a call to action. And I want to share that with you as you're actually yourself trying to draw some of the examples that are given here, particularly those that pertain to the significance of teaching African Americans. And not only to the significance of teaching African Americans, but to the significance of African Americans teaching African Americans. So I'll just say right off the bat that even though this internet forum enables people to join us from all over the world, and maybe there are people from various parts of this region and so forth, I'm actually directing the comments today to my brothers and sisters who reside here in the South DeKalb Baha'i community, because this is actually an African American Baha'i community located within a wider African American community. Therefore, the potential to carry out what is called for here, that is reaching the masses and steadily extending in this work of African Americans teaching African Americans, is infinitely possible. And the results and the rewards will be immediately evident when we can engage in this pattern of steady, determined action that has unabated vigor and determination. So I will, like I said, share with you a few minutes of this video just to get us all thinking about what these conditions actually are.
It would be an impossible task to befittingly recount within the limited scope of a single letter all the many crises and victories, the challenges and accomplishments that, taken together, comprise the storied history of this community over the course of the century since the Master's passing. Suffice it to say that we have continually been in a process of learning and building capacity. Through our efforts during the 25-year series of plans devised by the Universal House of Justice, and now recently concluded, we have established the instruments necessary to embrace and nurture multitudes of souls, and to welcome countless numbers of them in the coming years to the sheltering shade of the cause of God. As the Supreme Body's magnificent Rezvan message this year made abundantly clear, the patterns of action now emerging will empower masses of people in steadily expanding numbers to seize control of their spiritual destinies. They need only to be pursued with unabated vigor and determination. A new one-year plan has just been launched, and during these same 12 months, we will commemorate the centenary of the ascension of Abdu'l-Baha. Without a doubt, we will call to mind his summons to each of us to be unwavering in our faithfulness to the covenant, manifesting this, among other ways, in our fidelity to the guidance of the Universal House of Justice, and in our determination to prosecute with energy, focused attention, and to the last detail, the current stage of the divine plan. Beyond this, we will remember his admonitions to us to strive to become the very embodiments of divine love to one another and towards all people, mindful that lines and boundaries of race, ethnicity, or class among members of the human family are imaginary and not in the plan of God. We will certainly strive to reflect that love in our efforts to share the unifying cause of God with the diverse people of our nation. Nearly 80,000 people are currently taking part in core activities across the United States, about a third of whom have not formally embraced the faith. In patterns of activity now emerging in hundreds of clusters, with a steady and strong institute process at its heart, an ideal environment is being created for multitudes to be influenced by and attracted to the Baha'i revelation. An openness to forthright sharing of the mission and teachings of Baha'u'llah is taking hold, as are opportunities to invite those who are so inclined to investigate, even to embrace his cause. We hope that in our individual and collective efforts in all settings, devotional gatherings, firesides, study circles, wherever we are interacting with others, whether online or in person, substantial progress will be made in welcoming new souls into the faith. This will require continuing attention in those neighborhoods where intensive activity is taking place, where, in some cases, hundreds of souls have come into contact with the spirit of the faith. Just as importantly, this work should go on wherever Baha'is live and serve throughout our hundreds of clusters. We affirm once again the vital necessity of teaching African Americans and indigenous peoples, groups whose capabilities and ultimately indispensable contributions to the advancement of this cause have been attested to in the writings of our faith. Of people of African descent, Abdu'l-Baha stated, Baha'u'llah once compared the colored people to the black people of the eye, surrounded by the white. In this black pupil, you see the reflection of that which is before it, and through it, the light of the Spirit shines forth. About the indigenous peoples of the American continent, we find the following in one of the Master's tablets of the Divine Plan. Attach great importance to the indigenous population of America. Should they be educated and guided, there can be no doubt that they will become so illumined as to enlighten the whole world. Although teaching is incumbent on all believers without restriction, it is crucial that in particular the African American and indigenous believers of this country arise and take their rightful place at the forefront of this work. Further, we must not fail to call for the contributions of the vast and diverse immigrant populations who have come to these shores in recent decades and demonstrated a great receptivity to the teachings of the Baha'i faith. The services of these souls, together with their African American and indigenous brothers and sisters will be instrumental to the growth and development of a truly just, inclusive, and unified society in this land. Their success will depend in part on the loving encouragement they initially receive from their fellow believers, as well as from the institutions of the faith at every level.
So we're going to pause there. I know you all have probably been watching this in the feasts and also just probably in your own individual viewing. But I wanted to share that section of the message and really to focus our attention, though, on the element that draws our attention to the vital role of having African American and indigenous persons, as well as those from immigrant groups who are arriving on the shores of the United States, at the forefront of this work. So it has been without notice that there's been many efforts over many decades, long preceding my particular experience with the Baha'i community. However, as experience grows, so too does acceleration. So what is possible today is far exceeds, anything that we could have done several plans ago. And part of that is how well we can work with people in neighborhoods and communities. So at one point, obviously, many of you began the work when there was no training institute. I did not, but you have experience with how you had to be very determined and serve with unabated vigor, because there really was only the individual who, perhaps working with a small team of friends, was creating that material and reaching out and doing all of this work. However, as you noted in the message and in the video that we just played, that in this case, the study circle and this strong institute process is actually at the heart of how you can reach the masses and empower them to take control of their own destiny, as opposed to having just a handful of Baha'is who feel like they have to shoulder all of the work. In which case we know that, we can only shoulder a very small number because we are a small number. But what does it look like when we really lean in and we begin to see that, by systematically working cycle after cycle with a group of friends, they are able to arise and serve for themselves. They've always been capable. However, they were unaware, one, of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, which I was as well, when my friends in Cameroon kept saying to me, all of the things that you're saying, are you sure you are not a Baha'i? I had no idea what a Baha'i was. No one had shined the light of Baha'u'llah on me. Therefore, I was expressing perhaps certain views and actions and habits that would have been beneficial to the Baha'i community, but without someone opening their lips and telling me that Baha'u'llah had made himself present in the world, I wouldn't have known this. Likewise, without being able to come to a community where not only was the door open to worship, but also to service. Because the Baha'i faith distinguishes itself in the fact that we don't separate these two. The institution of the Mashriq al-Azkar, which at times expresses itself through prayers at dawn, at times actually goes so deeply into the roots of society that it takes rise as a continental or a national or a local house of worship. In any case, it also begins as an embryo, and it has potential to grow from every single devotional meeting, anytime the friends come together to pray. If there is this understanding that our worship and our service are united, then the stirrings of the institution come to take shape. So as we're thinking about that, even in a gathering like the one that we have now, a gathering for prayer and also for discussion and study and so forth, maybe we'll turn again to the message that we're referencing from our National Spiritual Assembly, in which it says, although teaching is incumbent on all believers without restriction, it is crucial that in particular, the African American and indigenous believers of this country arise and take their rightful place at the forefront of this work. And I have to say, I mentioned earlier the delight that we had, and I'm sure we have in common, at receiving news of the appointment of the new auxiliary board members whose terms will begin on July 1st. I will tell you a special point of delight is that some of those members who are beginning to serve, and in particular, a few of the African Americans who are now serving as auxiliary board members beginning this new term, among them are some who at the beginning of the previous plan had never heard the name of Baha'u'llah. And yet, in this span of time, they have not only been welcomed into the community, but they have arisen and taken their rightful place at the forefront of this work. And so now these men and women will be at the leadership position of their communities. And many of them, we can remember just meeting just a couple of years ago in a focus neighborhood, but not just leaving them and saying, okay, well, if you guys want to come to our Baha'i activities, you're welcome. Here we have a devotional, here we have a children's class, here we have a devotional meeting. Would you like to take a class in the study circle? Went far beyond that. And we could see that if these friends were to really, really understand the Institute well, not only would they embody it for themselves, but they understood the link between worship and service. And they took it quickly back to their friends and family. And the growth in many of these neighborhoods was not because the enterprising Baha'i pioneers, as wonderful as they were, because they were the initiators, but they could not have possibly carried the message as far and helped it to penetrate as deeply as it has, had it not been for these friends who were empowered to do so for themselves. So the message, of course, points out to us that these centers of intense activity are where we learn, although every believer is also charged to continue the work wherever he or she lives. And the wonderful thing is that we have this constant exchange of experience, and we're able to carry that to many, many different places. So for instance, were the work to intensify in the neighborhoods right around the Baha'i Unity Center among the friends in the South DeKalb Baha'i community, they would be able to not only engage expanding numbers of youth and adults and children and people of all ages, they would also be able to share that with the community, with the cluster, ultimately with the region, and that from the region to the nation to the world. So this process is a lot more profound, I think, than sometimes we realize when we're going about carrying out these activities and wondering, why must I do this with unabated vigor and determination? After all, I get tired sometimes, and I am the only one who is doing this, or me and just a couple of friends. So let's look a little bit deeper into what are some of the patterns of thought and action that can help us as we're developing new ways that enable us to have this unabated vigor and allow us to serve with determination over time. So one of them is the fact that we know that in most cases, we are an events-driven population. And I'm speaking quite specifically to my friends who live in the South DeKalb Baha'i community, although maybe others who are on with us have also experienced this, particularly those of us who happen to be African American, because in the church, there isn't so much of an opportunity for us to do more than events. The church is based on, and of course it varies by denomination, but generally speaking, there's a strong pastoral figure. And that person is basically guiding the flock, if you will. I know that's how it's described sometimes. So others are able to contribute to ministries, or maybe there's a women's group, or maybe, but largely these are events. So we can say, well, it's wonderful. We had the women's luncheon, and we had the children's tea, and we had. But as for our ability to contribute as protagonists to a rhythm that gives rise to a new way of life, actually, as members of a congregation, we don't generally have that opportunity. So it makes sense that moving from an events-driven background or way of life to a rhythm-centered way of life is one that will require a little bit of attention. Luckily, though, Black people, if we acknowledge it, we are the people of the drum. And so the rhythm, actually, I think once we get into it, which is why perhaps some of these friends that we met in the neighborhood a few years ago and who now are moving on to serve as our auxiliary board members, they felt the rhythm and they were comforted by the rhythm. It's like the drum, it's like the heart. I was thinking that when you don't have rhythm, sometimes your breath may come in fits and starts. Well, even just doing that made me a little bit lightheaded in just a couple of breaths like that. Whereas when I return to my normal pattern of breathing, I will feel light and easy and perhaps a little bit more joyful. So we're really blessed because we're given the tools to move from an events-driven society to rhythmic cycles. You've noticed this, of course, over the past 25 years. We have this close accompaniment from our regional Baha'i councils and our auxiliary board members. And in that way, they're helping to develop our area teaching committees. And the area teaching committees, as they begin to develop and find their place alongside the local spiritual assemblies, they're able to actually shape culture. And they do this because they're able to affect various cycles in the continual patterns of life, right? So we know that within a cycle, we have a period of time that is very intense. And we have about 2 weeks of that. And then we have a period of time of consolidation, which, while less intense perhaps at times, allows us to sew together all of those conversations and all of the new friends that we met, or the expansion into families that we're experiencing. Those things get solidified and they become part of culture during that consolidation period. And then every cycle, we're given a reflection phase. Wonderful, praise God. Now we're able to look back on our action, and we never go more than 3 months without saying, okay, how are we doing at this? That way, we wouldn't have years and years and years of making effort only to see that that effort doesn't meet the needs of the population, or maybe the nature of our own conversation isn't really uniting them with the Word of God, or maybe our ability to offer the Training Institute and its courses needs strengthening. We would never go any further than that, because we always have these periods of reflection. And guess what? Because they become part of culture, they become more and more regular. And so we can tell that this is happening because the conversation begins to not say, should we have cycles of growth or events? No, instead it recognizes that actually events punctuate cycles. Events punctuate a process. So rather than saying, let's have a cookout, that will be the way that we will promulgate the faith of God, we instead would say, you know what, let's invite the families to help us host a cookout, maybe at the midpoint of the Youth Institute campaign. Or, you know, the parents actually want to host a cookout for the next Children's Class Festival. What can we do to make sure that they can contribute to that? And hopefully it makes sense as to that subtle difference between how it is that we are simply based in events and how it is that we begin to see events as those joyful periods that punctuate a process, and how that is a way that people become empowered and they can take control of their own destiny instead of coming to an occasional event, which they enjoy, and then they go back and don't quite know what to do after that. So we can see here in these photos, I just selected a few from community life. These are some festivals that have been held over time. One was focused early in the pandemic on health. And some of the graduates of the junior youth program in one of the neighborhoods were able to have a discussion about how we could avoid getting COVID, in part through our masks and so forth and our social distancing, but also in terms of what we eat. What is it that makes up our diet? And then one of the fathers in the neighborhood said, you know, we got to get our minds straight. So he hosted some yoga and stretching because that was his interest. And then in the lower photo, that was some months later when preparations were beginning to be made, thinking about the summer. So, you know, around April or so, the families came together and they started talking about, what do we want to do during the summer? And so they began working on that as well. So these are naturally events. There is not a festival every single day or every single week. There's not an opportunity for the community maybe to get together in this way. But every single week, yes, there are gatherings for prayer, and the children are learning and the study circles continue. And every now and then, there's a reason to punctuate that process with an event. So another area that we might want to think about as we're developing new patterns of thought and action that enable us to sustain our vigor and also to work with determination is moving from fragmentation to coherence. So if we pit ideas against each other and we have to select, should I do this or should I do that? Well, you know, we often find ourselves in kind of a perilous cycle. And we all will say things to ourselves, particularly at this particular time, things like, you know, we should strengthen the core activities, but we really have to dedicate our efforts to racial and social justice initiatives. Or, you know, I really hope that our Baha'i community can come to embrace many others, but first we have to work on our own unity. And until we get that done, we won't be able to actually carry these activities out in terms of the community. But as we begin to learn together, and particularly if we use this framework for action that allows us to actually take action and then consult, and afterwards we can reflect on that action, and we keep studying the guidance and we try to apply it in better and better ways, then we begin to understand that actually these things are entirely together. In other words, the surest path to racial and social justice is through the development of communities. And the surest path to community unity is through being able to open our embrace and to welcome many, many others. Becoming hyper-focused on self naturally doesn't take us there. And it was in a message that we all remember from April of 2011, when the House of Justice wrote to an individual believer and helped us to understand how that actually takes place. It says, the pattern of spiritual and social life taking shape in clusters that involves study circles, children's classes, junior youth groups, devotional meetings, home visits, teaching efforts and reflection meetings, as well as holy day observances, 19-day feasts and other gatherings, provides abundant opportunities for engagement, experience, consultation, and learning that will lead to change in personal and collective understanding and action. Issues of prejudice of race, class, and color will inevitably arise as the Friends reach out to diverse populations, especially in the closely knit context of neighborhoods. There, every activity can take on the form most suited to the culture and the interests of the population, so that new believers can be quickened and confirmed in a nurturing and familiar environment until they are able to offer their share to the resolution of the challenges faced by a growing Baha'i community. For this is not a process that some carry out on behalf of others who are passive recipients, the mere extension of a congregation and an invitation to paternalism, but one in which an ever-increasing number of souls recognize and take responsibility for the transformation of humanity set in motion by Baha'u'llah. In an environment of love and trust, born of common belief, practice, and mission, individuals of different races will have the intimate connection of heart and mind, upon which mutual understanding and change depend. As a result of their training and deepening, growing numbers of believers will draw insights from the writings to sensitively and effectively address issues of racial prejudice that arise within their personal lives and families, among community members, and in social settings and the workplace. As the programs of growth advance, the scope and intensity of activities grow, the Friends will be drawn into participation in conversations and, in time, initiatives for social action at the grassroots, where issues pertaining to freedom from prejudice naturally emerge, whether directly or indirectly. So this is a vision of what comes next, and I hope it's helpful to us as we think about avoiding the tendency to have fragmentation, and we come to value coherence. Once again, just using the analogy of the human body, as I mentioned, when something is irregular and doesn't have a pattern, it's really hard to maintain. But again, fragmentation is also hard to maintain, because then I have to run over here and do this activity for social justice, and then run back over here and do a Baha'i activity if I have time. And then I have to go over here and try to save the whales because I do care about them as well. And then come back over here and try to do a Baha'i activity. And maybe I have to go over and make sure that the trees are not being cut down and that the water is not being polluted, and then come back and do a Baha'i activity. When in fact, Baha'u'llah has drawn the circle of unity, and it includes all of those things. And we're just trying to learn at this point about how to make that more and more apparent to us. Maybe one other word about coherence. The coherence of the family, especially when it comes to African-American communities. I've learned during the pandemic that having had the opportunity to work with many, many Black communities and individuals, I've learned that there's somewhat of a pattern in many regions where African-American people were taught the faith one at a time. And as a result, many of them are disconnected from their own families. They will say, I'm the only Baha'i in my family. So no, I don't have an opportunity to go to the family reunions or to, spend time with them much. I'm trying to engage in Baha'i life. And they also say, I'm sad, I'm lonely. Often the people of my community don't actually understand my culture, and they don't really respond well to the things that are of interest to me. And so a question many of us have been exploring, especially during the pandemic, because we have technology, is what does it look like to extend the teachings of Baha'u'llah through an entire extended family, through whatever means we need? So we might go and give effort. I have this picture up here because this is one of the Sunday devotionals that they have in one of the neighborhoods. And families will come out and they'll talk about what's happening instead of just having their children go to children's class and their junior youth and junior youth groups and maybe one member of the family in study circles. Even if all of the families are not in all of those spaces, they know that there's a weekly space where the whole community can come out and discuss what is of importance and also to learn how this process is moving ahead. And that coherence, and particularly I believe for African Americans, is going to be significant because we are a family-oriented people. We've come this far by faith and by family. And separating off one or another is probably something we don't want to continue to engender as a pattern. We want to say, even if I've just met one friend, maybe one very eager youth or one eager adult, one eager mother or father, I probably soon want that conversation to extend to who are the other people that are a part of the community as you see it. And oftentimes that is our extended families. I want to bring up just one other point that we want to try to move beyond as far as developing new patterns of thought and action, and that is to move beyond freneticism to focus. And again, I'm thinking about my poor human body and that, movement that's all over the place and here and there, it's quite tiring. And focus is really how we learn. Of course, that we like to pretend that we're multitasking, and especially women, we love to claim I'm multitasking, but brain research has proven that we're not. Actually, the human brain really just focuses on one thing. So if we have decided today that we're going to write letters to people that at our workplace and do the laundry and pay attention to the child who's sitting next to us, and that we say, whoa, I am good. I am doing all three of these things at once. I am multitasking. No, we're not. Actually, in the end, something is suffering. The letters might have errors. The child has actually been rather ignored. The laundry has probably been sitting in that one place, either the washer or the dryer, for a very long time because we couldn't go and actually, attend to those things. So we might think about, and I'm saying this somewhat facetiously because I do know that in life, sometimes we do have to do more than one thing. But is it possible, and again, I'm speaking to my friends here in the South DeKalb Baha'i community, is it possible for us to focus for a time on African-American believers coming to the forefront of the work, especially in teaching? Because this is so, so crucial. And what would it look like if we were to focus, and if we were to focus naturally, we would have certain measurements of effectiveness. So for instance, we couldn't just continue to go about our everyday lives doing what we'd always been doing, but rather some of the things that we've always been doing are very useful. Many of you here have regular devotional meetings to which you invite people. Wonderful, that's a foundation. But then we'd have to consult together to see how is it that perhaps entire families are now in our community praying together, whether in the groups that we already have or extending those into their own homes. Do we actually see spaces where this idea of the covenant of Baha'u'llah with its purpose and mode of action that are centered on the oneness of humanity and the nobility of every human soul, do we believe that that's actually the divine elixir that we're going to apply broadly in the community, obviously responding in the way that the community needs to be responded to at that given time? Do we believe, for instance, that African people or African American people, just like the other populations of the world, are capable of developing new skills, new qualities, new patterns of action, and becoming that new type of social actor who is entirely focused on the betterment of the community? And if we do believe that, are we willing to walk with African American people over the time that it takes to help them grow and develop? In the same way that I'm describing this very small number of auxiliary board members who are coming to serve, that's a regular pattern of action. It wasn't just a matter of saying, okay, let's go find a Black auxiliary board member. Rather, it was meeting someone, recognizing their capacity, and then also understanding that that capacity grows. But even now, even at the level of the continent, even as I look from far up in the Yukon in Canada all the way down to the tip of Argentina, I still only see very, very small examples. So the ability to reach really, really large numbers is something that I think we have an opportunity to learn about. And the conditions in the South DeKalb Baha'i community actually are quite ideal for learning how to do that. Now, It requires of us, though, a new form of reflection, because I know we will often say, in Wandi, we tried that, it didn't work. Or we could say, you know what, we tried that, but when we came back and reflected on action in light of the guidance, we actually discovered that the nature of our conversation maybe wasn't as deep as it could have been. Maybe we were just inviting people to come to what they thought was a church. And when they arrived, they were surprised that there wasn't a pastor and they didn't really know what to do in that setting. And so we went back and we said, you know, let's have a deeper conversation. Let's ask our friends questions about their aspirations. What do they want to see in the community? And find out whether this pattern of action that we're trying to help take root could help them to meet that aspiration. You know, we often will look and see also that when we work with a population, and particularly an African-American population, we might say, well, you know, Nwandi, do you not see some of the patterns and the tendencies of these people? And we might even say it in that way. We might not even say of our people. And, you know, we might stop there. You see, they're not regularly studying now. Some of them actually have such challenges as drugs and alcohol abuse. There's all matters of family difficulties. And I guess I'm just wondering, do we believe in the capacity of the people around us as strongly as the Black community was believed in, say, Colombia? So that, yes, of course, when we arrive in Norte de Cauca, these people of color also have a myriad of social challenges, and all the same social forces that are assailing all of us are also assailing them, and sometimes hitting a lot harder because there isn't this knowledge that we can all ride on the Ark of the Covenant. But are we willing to bear the pain that sometimes comes along with maintaining unabated vigor and determination? Do we really believe that our people are able to overcome these challenges and become the propagators, the protagonists of their own positive future? And you know, if at times we find that we're not able to believe that, I don't think we should beat ourselves up. Because actually the false narrative of the past 400 years tells us that we are incapable of doing this, that perhaps a few extraordinary Black people will arise and do anything, but the masses are incapable of doing so. That's the 400 years of false narrative. Now, perhaps because we're motivated, and it was noted in this particular message as we saw the video, perhaps we're motivated because Baha'u'llah, and then after him Abdu'l-Baha, and the messages from Shoghi Effendi, as well as the guidance from the Universal House of Justice, tell us actually that that false narrative is in fact that false. So if that is the case, what steps do I have to take in order to demonstrate, not for myself, but for the people themselves, ourselves, that we are capable of arising to this point, that we can change our patterns of thought and action. And frankly, this is the only way that we're really going to change the fortunes of our society, of our community. We cannot just wander around saying, wow, this is a really oppressive place. And oh my, look at how much more poverty impacts us. Oh, look, our schools are in terrible condition. Oh, look, we don't have access to the same jobs and the same healthcare. We acknowledge that those things are all true. But I guess I have to ask us, because I am part of this population myself, do we have confidence that in South DeKalb, just as in South America, Black populations can develop the capacity to change the circumstances of their own communities, both spiritually and materially? And if we're willing to learn about that, and I acknowledge it doesn't happen just like that, but if we're willing to learn about those things, we have the right circumstances to do so. And guess what? When do we get started? Now. We're already underway in the cluster. We have many, many things that are happening now to enable large numbers of youth to begin taking control of their own destiny. We might ask ourselves in the South DeKalb community, how many youth from our areas are actually aware of these opportunities and are being given access to them? And if we find that that number is somewhat small, no harm. We can begin the conversations today that will enable that number to increase. A few things that we want to do is to keep in mind that the conversations, though, are not random. We're actually, throughout the region this summer, we're meeting with and trying to identify eager youth and adults, help them complete the first few books of the Training Institute, while simultaneously starting their first core activities whether they be children's classes, junior youth groups, whether they're additional study circles or devotional gatherings, and continuing their study of the sequence. Now, you heard me correctly, so you can say, but Inwandi, if they've only completed books 1 and 2, how are they going to teach children's classes and animate? And that's because we're going to help them. We're going to follow the same pattern that worked so effectively for the Black people of South America and those of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the brown people of Cambodia and all of these places where these local and national houses of worship have taken root. We're going to take that same path of action with the same belief in our own people that they are capable of arising if only we will continue to move with unabated vigor and determination. In order to do that, I would suggest don't work alone. God loves those who work in teams. That way, when the road seems rough, we always have someone with whom to reflect, and it won't seem so hopeless. We'll be able to identify together, and by the way, in consultation with all of the people of the community about what next steps we need to take together. So with that in mind, I think maybe I'll just leave you with these thoughts that we'll also work with determination in the spirit of the master. You heard in the message as well that we are doing all of that work this year with the knowledge that we will soon be commemorating the 100 years since the ascension of the master and the reading of his will and testament. That's going to reverberate all around the planet, even for those who are as yet unaware that Abdu'l-Baha was ever here. But he was, and he was right here in North America. He walked amongst us. And so maybe with that image before us, knowing that we're actually only walking in his footsteps, we can also think about what it was that he shared with Lua Getzinger when he asked her to do something that also seemed very audacious. Like it might seem audacious to us to think about the South DeKalb Baha'i community as being a source for expansion into a very, very large and vibrant Black community. He told Lua Getzinger, "Strive day and night to attain this exalted state. Look at me. Thou dost not know 1,000th part of the difficulties and seemingly insurmountable passes that rise daily before my eyes. I do not heed them. I am walking in my chosen highway. I know the destination. Hundreds of storms and tempests may rage furiously around my head. Hundreds of Titanics may sink to the bottom of the sea. And mad waves may rise to the roof of heaven. All these will not change my purpose, will not disturb me in the least. I will not look either to the right or to the left. I am looking ahead, far, far, piercing through the impenetrable darkness of night, the howling winds, the raging storms. I see the glorious light beckoning me forward, forward. The balmy weather is coming, and the voyager shall land safely." That, I believe, is unabated vigor and determination. And knowing, of course, that we all have different life circumstances, different capacities, and capacities that we are really not ourselves even aware of. Maybe we can think a little bit, though, about how we can use this example of the master and the guidance of the House of Justice and the support of all of our friends, as well as the institutions of the faith, to make sure that we can distinguish ourselves as a Baha'i community that is able to translate the teachings of Baha'u'llah into reality with growing numbers. And that we'll do this with unabated vigor and determination. So thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I hope this was helpful to you. And if there's anything else that I can do to be helpful, I'm very happy to do so.
Thank you, Counselor Lawson. That was very informative and kind of like a blueprint, really, for our next steps. And I love the comparison, or just bringing up the point of how the other places around the globe that now have houses of worship, because they need those centers of learning and community building physically because of all the work that they've been doing. That is an excellent way for us to look at that. And the fact that these were people of color and Africans and African descent around the world, really, that are making these changes. So thank you so much for that. Friends, any comments, thoughts? Barbara, did I see your hand up just a second ago?
Which Barbara?
Barbara McClendon.
No. Well, You'll have to excuse me. I was trying to chat, put a chat and have to excuse me. I have to prepare for this LSA meeting. Thank you, Nwandi. It's always enlightening. In fact, you gave me food for thought and some things I was thinking about doing, but you have helped me to change my mind about it, and I'll talk to you about it later.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Aloha pa.
Aloha, have a
Aloha,
good meeting.
Barbara.
Thank
You know, I usually don't come up to make any kind of comment during these Sunday morning sessions, but thank you so much. That was so enlightenment, and I just have to say, answer the question that you asked. Yes, I do believe that the population around the Unity Center can rise up and take control of this faith and their destiny in their lives and whatnot. And I also want to thank you, Mwande, because you and I have had conversations way too often, and I know you're tired of beating it over my head about event-driven and focus. And I got it this morning, because we went a step further. We went about fragmentation and frenetic, whatever the word is. And so the rhythmic cycle and cohesive focus, all of that makes sense. And it has to come with the cycle of the faith. It makes sense now. I got it. Because, you know, the event thing, you know, looking from the center perspective, is like, okay, well, how do you get the community to the center? You know, but that's not the focus. That's not. And thank you. It's going to take me some more pondering, studying, praying, and meditating. But thank you for opening my eyes this morning.
Well, thank you, Barbara. You know, we worked together for so many years, and we don't, you know, we don't beat each other over the head. We just walk together. And keep walking,
Yeah.
The thing about it, though, I think that's so great too, is in addition to all the things you noted, the ability to actually just take some small action over time. As you know, we've started, and we know so many families, but because maybe our orientation was events driven, and we thought, but there's only 5 people here.
Yeah.
And I say, yes, let us go far with 5. And as we begin to understand the penetration into their families, there's not 5 people coming to my event. I mean, I'm not a professional dinner party thrower. I'm a Baha'i. So I want people themselves to seize this the same way I had access to seizing it for myself, and the fact that it's had impact on my family. I want others to be able to do that as well. So I think when we begin to do that over time, we'll begin to see how it works in that way. I'm sorry.
But my next question is, Mwande, where does the institution of the LSA plays in this? You know, say for instance, you know, you kind of like centered the talk around, you know, Saptacat, with such a strong assembly that have been, you know, around for the time that it's been around. Should they be more involved in the teaching work, the planning of program? I mean, how can the Institute, you know, help support, sustain, or direct this? You know, given, you know, we've always had the excuse, but there's just a couple of us doing stuff, you know.
Yeah, I don't think we know the answer to that, because it's a consultative process. And we do know, though, that the local spiritual assembly plays a great role, one that no one else can play, by the way. The area teaching committee can help us to begin to develop culture. The auxiliary board members can come and nurture, obviously, the protection and the teaching of the faith and so forth. But the local spiritual assembly in each place is the moral compass, the House of Justice says, of that place. And so whether or not an entire population knows which way to direct its actions and its thoughts and so forth, that is actually the work of the local spiritual assembly. And it becomes more and more pronounced, by the way. I mean, if we don't have anyone in the wider community and we have a very small group of Baha'is, maybe that work doesn't look to, it's just not pronounced, because we don't have any reason to really experience it. But now, if you go back to those, let's say we have 5 families, and we're working with them, and we have this vision, like, yeah, they're connected to these, and so it's steadily expanding. Then the work of the assembly becomes clearer. And at the other end, I will tell you that neighborhoods that attempt their work without the LSAs, they always reach a point at which, you know, it deflates, and it deflates around the issue of really spiritual growth, awakening, and ultimately morality. And so I don't think we have to worry too much in our community because the growth is so small right now.
Mhm.
But we will assuredly learn alongside our local spiritual assembly what it looks like, not only to think about administering the feast and the fund and taking care of the center, but how are all of the families in the community? And as we begin to have families that are aware of the assembly and they say, oh, I'd like to consult with the assembly about, whatever it is that is happening in the neighborhood. Well, the assembly, that's going to be a whole new frontier of learning, right? It hasn't had that experience yet. And as it begins to do that, its patterns of action and so forth will also, I'm sure, take on new forms in keeping with whatever the needs are in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara, we have Emma. What should we be doing?
I have a question.
12:33. I know you guys have assembly. But
Yes, and I just have a question for Nwande. We're going to pass on the play this time. We'll play next time, okay?
Okay, wonderful.
But, Nwande, when you were talking, I couldn't help but listen intently with how people are described, because most of us, Black people in America, identify as African American. However, there are many of us here in America that identify as indigenous Black people. We were indigenous here, Black people. And when the news media or whomever show indigenous people, they don't ever show indigenous Black people. They show indigenous brown people or a mixture of people that are different in your Navajo community, or you're this, but you got your Choctaws, you got your Creeks, you got your Cherokees, who were Black people, originally Black people, and their identity was taken away from them, and their culture was taken away from them. So we, in the story of the slave trade, did not realize we were being brought back and forth between the Americas as indigenous Black people of the Americas, and not all of us coming from Africa. Am I making sense there? And we are all, Afro-Indigenous people. Yes, yes, we are.
Yeah.
But I identify as an indigenous Black person of the Americas, and especially since I found out the truth about my identity. And of course, it's not going to separate me from anybody else, but it's just a truth that has been left out of our history, out of our Black indigenous history.
So I think, none of these things are fragmented. So, if an individual has the opportunity to work deeply in one area or another, I'm also a person of Creek descent. So I know very well my ancestry, which is, ultimately everyone is African though. So to me, whether or not someone is saying African, I was like, everyone here is actually African-American, but that's okay. I will let everyone can identify as they want, because Baha'u'llah said the primary identity is the identity of the soul. So therefore, we're all one. But along the way to discovering oneness, however we wish to, best do this work is how we should do it. The challenge though is when it becomes a distraction. So if I feel, for instance, that my primary purpose as a Baha'i is to make sure that as many people as possible know of my Muskogee Creek background, and what I think I'm actually going to miss the boat, because whether or not I'm working with African people, indigenous people, African-American people, the work actually remains the same. It doesn't really change. It's really, are you aware of the revelation of Baha'u'llah? Do you want to try to apply this in any way? Whether or not you decide to become a Baha'i or not, by the way, that's completely irrelevant. That's another discussion that often fragments Black people, is they say, I can't invite my relatives, they're Christian. I was like, yes, so am I. Christian, Muslim, we're half and half. I always tell them Christian plus Muslim makes Baha'i. That's why I'm here. But that doesn't keep us from being able to still work together. So that's the perspective I come from. As for history, yeah, there's a lot more that needs to be learned. And I just hope that in this time period where so many people are suddenly going, oh my gosh, I just learned that they came before Columbus. Okay, I'm happy for you. I grew up in a Pan-African community in California, so these things are not so amazing to me, but I'm happy that people know of them. I'm especially happy people know of them to the extent that they use them to make sure that the penetrative influence of Baha'u'llah's revelation reaches as many people as possible. So if those happen to be indigenous African people indigenous to the Americas, so be it. I know them very well because I've spent time also in South and Central America, where certainly in Ecuador and other places, you will find entire Black communities who came before Columbus. And that's fine. That's
Right, right.
But it doesn't
Okay,
change the nature of the
I'm
work.
on board. I
You're
get
on
you.
board. All right.
I get what you're saying. What I think what my concern is, Nwanda, is in the particular with many different families, and it probably is something that we have to relegate to a personal thing, but the loss of land, the reclaiming of land, and things that were taken away because we did not have the proper identity to reclaim those lands and to take charge of our lands and get our lands back, literally stolen.
Absolutely.
See what I'm saying? So these types of things wherein we could have, let's say, an area of land to really offer for a more communal, a more unified situation. We have lost a lot of those things.
So
you see, this is where I'm coming from.
No, I hear you. And I acknowledge this fully. I mean, even within our own families, how many times has land been seized? How many times have people coming right out of a period of enslavement gathered their resources? I mean, my grandfather is 99 years old. He talks to us incessantly about how the families immediately, they collected their own resources, started their own school, and naturally people around them, being a bit immature in their understanding of the oneness of humanity, terrorized them, and he had to go from place to place to place. But nevertheless, he has a very good education. He has gone on to do great things. But the point to me is the South DeKalb Baha'i community has land. It has a place. It can work with the Black people that are around. However those Black people identify themselves, we'll learn more in consultation with them. We don't have to impose anything on them. We're not colonizers. So let us just invite them onto the land for the purposes of trying to advance from where we are today to a brighter future. And yes, there'll be many people that will work in other individual ways. And I think that's wonderful. The challenge becomes, again, with focus. Because, for instance, sometimes people are so focused on a specific line of social action or discourse, and they try to make the entire Baha'i community do that. And then that distracts the entire Baha'i community, when in fact, that wonderful and enlightened individual could do that and still, be supportive of the focus of the Baha'i community. I know in my own neighborhood, this has been the case. We've done so much social action that you all aren't even aware of, because I rally my own neighbors. We've cleaned up the sewage here. The county was dumping raw sewage into our South DeKalb community. The community was trying to put a privatized housing project here. My neighbors and I use the revelation. They're not Baha'is, but they know how to engage the revelation, and we don't get stepped on by the county. We don't get pushed around. Now, if I go to the cluster reflection meeting and say, hey, Baha'is, everyone needs to turn their attention to my neighborhood where we're doing these things because this is important, then I distract. No, actually, my cluster needs to really learn well how to work with growing numbers of families, and it needs to engage people in the courses of the Institute so that we can have enough capacity to actually move forward as a group. So I definitely commend I know all of us have various lines of action that we're taking, and they're significant. Application of the Word of God is done in our workplaces, it's done in our interactions with other civic groups, in the historical records that we help to correct, and so forth. But I guess today I was speaking specifically to the Baha'i community of South DeKalb, and I want to see, do we want to go ahead and extend this conversation to many, many people of color in our own community?
Outstanding dialogue, everybody. I'm sorry, it is 12:41. Way beyond our closing time, and they have an assembly meeting scheduled, and folks have to get prepared for that. Counselor Lawson, thank you for this outstanding presentation. You could easily come back and share it verbatim once again, because the conversation is not over, and it's only just getting started, people thinking in these terms. So it needs to be reiterated at some point. So maybe if you're willing, it doesn't have to be verbatim, but I'm just saying the concept, for sure, folks need to, many more people need to hear it and start internalizing it. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time, Emma. Just so the group knows that we are not going to be meeting next week because of the 4th of July holiday. And so we'll resume the following week after that, and there'll be a notice out as to who the presenter will be at that time. So meanwhile, please remember that the food distribution program is every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Baha'i Unity Center in the parking lot. Please spread the word to help combat food insecurity within the community. And for members of the Baha'i faith, you're warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund, the Sandy Springs Baha'i Fund, and the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system, ocs.baha'i.us, or you can mail a check to the Baha'i Unity Center at 2370 Wesley Chapel Road, Decatur, Georgia, 335. Many thanks to all who worked together today to make the program possible. Our speaker, our volunteer readers, Barbara Hennix, who keeps us moving forward, the spiritual assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb and Sandy Springs, and thanks to all of you for sharing your day with us. I'm Hermione Pickens. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, stay safe and well. We will end now with a closing prayer for the departed. Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness, cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Abdul Baha. Thank you so much, friends, for coming. Allahu Akbar. Till next time.
Allahu Akbar.
Hello, Pa. Goodbye.
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.